Hey guys! Well, depending on how active you are on social media, it's been a very interesting 48 hours as we've gotten some uh, intriguing on the outside sounding announcements out of people regarding some of the U.S. based tooling that belong to Revell. I say sounds intriguing because when you start sort of peeling through the layers of what actually seems to be involved in these, they're perhaps not as fantastical as they originally sounded in the press releases. At least half of it. I mean, the other half is probably really good for the people involved. Uh, and yeah, it's of course restarted the whole fire upon the internet with what's going on with Revell. So I'll try to do this in like a little bit of an order, perhaps. When you talk about Revell, or as I'm now going to start calling them, Blitzvell, uh, spread it around, make it a hashtag. Hashtag Blitzvell. They have apparently, and I don't know exactly who, because of course it's all very hush hush, secret right now, have hired back at least part of the Elk Grove Village Revell staff to be the people at the helm of the new U.S. offices of, Revell USA. Now, whether or not that means there's a development office and a design office like there was at, Elk Grove Village, probably not right away at least. But at least some of the people are now going to be working for, Revell here in the United States. Whether it's, a big deal, like a whole new Revell, or it's just a sales staff and social media people and some people to obviously run the warehouse and deal with parts requests and things like that remains to be seen. I'm assuming that, it's a great deal of that is determined by how successful the venture is going forwards. If Revell continues to be a success, both here and overseas, of course, you would think expand, upon the staff and make it a bigger company as time goes along. In its infancy, what we're going to have going on here, the third and fourth quarter of of 2018 here in the United States, will be a very small team, very focused on just basically getting the Revell products back out on the shelves and things like that, and then development of new products and things like that will probably, for the most part, at least right up front, be mostly based in the offices in Germany, and especially when you start considering the fact that there's probably 18 months of product in the pipeline when Revell was closed, right? We always talk about that, numerous times. It's not just what is coming out. There's always a whole long thing going on because you have to find this. If it's not a new car, or you can't, get computer data for it, you have to find the original car and measure it and photograph it and perhaps 3D scan it and then, design it in CAD and all the rest of that stuff. So it's not a situation where, oh, hey, they had 2 kits in the pipeline that were going to come out in 2018 and that was it. Now, there's probably, they went out of business, nominally speaking, at the beginning of 2018. So there's probably kits for all of 2018 already developed to the point where they were a for sure thing. They were coming out in 2018. And then you probably had at least half of 2019 that was, further along in development than just, it would be a cool idea. And then you have the cool ideas that list behind that. So there's probably, especially depending on how rapidly they want to bring these new ideas or new toolkits to market, it largely depends on, how quickly they'll run through that backlog of product, right? So there's that. And I'm of 2 minds of rehiring the old staff. First up on just on a personal level, and for them, I think it's great. I mean, hey, at least some of them got their jobs back. They really, really got screwed over by Habaco there in the end, and so it's good to see them back at work. The other side of that, on the more, I don't know if I say professional level because I'm not professional, but on the hobby level, from a more strictly speaking business standpoint, and not even maybe necessarily a business standpoint, but a technical standpoint, Revell hasn't been the most accurately, designed, fantastical thing in the last 4 or 5 years. Now, is that because Habaco was hemorrhaging money all of this time, and we just didn't realize it until up at the end when they stopped paying their employee stock plan, and then that, of course, torpedoed the entire thing? Or is that just the nature of what Revell thinks they can get away with for what they're charging for their product? Because, you know, one of the things that we always joke about, hey, if I won the lottery and I bought Revell, would be like having a serious discussion with the staff there to determine whether or not the kits that they're designing and the way they design them. We always talk about the 1, 2, 3 of thing of Revell. There's one huge issue, there's one minor issue, and then there's one thing you just shake your head at and you're like, what was going on when you thought about that? Is that a factor of money? Was there not enough cash flow going into the R&D department and the design department and then in the correcting the things department, as it were, to limit the gaffes and just very large mistakes? I mean, we've seen with Salvino's JR rushing a kit and not necessarily taking the time to fix things gives you a product that is not necessarily up to par. And you know, unfortunately for Salvino's, you get that whole first chance to make one chance to make a first impression kind of thing that hopefully here will maybe be forgiven and forgotten a lot quicker than anyone would have realized. We'll get that in a second. And then, you know, or is it just the design philosophy? We design kits for the common man, and we don't really care if they're accurate or not because we're just trying to sell, you know, to everybody, and we're just, you know, we don't care, basically. And then, you know, when you would go from there, it'd be like, if the design philosophy is we're just going to make a mediocre product because we just feel that's what Revell stands for, well, then you would get rid of those people. So again, I'm glad to see these people gotten their jobs back, but at the same time, if that just prolongs the malaise of Revell and the way they design their products. I mean, they've always built real well. There's never been an engineering standpoint. Whoever is the guy who goes, this plug goes into that hole, you know, and then we stick these things onto it. That guy, he gets to keep his job because he does a fantastic job. But the people that are doing the overall design, you know, again, is it money? Is it lack of focus? Which one? So I'm interested to see, you know, eventually what's going to happen. Like this Chevelle that's coming up, the test shots were already run, you know, prior to Revell going bankrupt in the first place. That was probably going to be a second quarter, or well, maybe a second quarter, but for sure third quarter release had Revell kept going on without going bankrupt. So you have to wonder how that kit is, right? What's going to be the 1, 2, 3 of that kit, because it's obviously designed and tooled and everything by the Revell we had prior to it going out of business. So that's what you have with Blitzvell and Revell USA. That's a going concern. We showed you the list of products that are coming out a couple weeks ago in one of the weekly videos. I've seen a few people, and I know Ryan asked me to mention it again in a video, who are convinced that Revell of Germany is going to do nothing but BMWs and German cars. The list is real, right? We showed you that spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is real. It's real. Go call your local hobby shop, if you still have one, and ask them what kits they're going to be getting in through the fall. They know, because all of this stuff is, right now, at this point, there's kits that are supposed to be coming in like mid to late September, right? So they have to have known this stuff exists for a little while now in order to order it so it comes in on time. So your local hobby shop, if you have one. Now, if you shop at Hobby Lobby because that's all you have, sorry, I don't know what to tell you, but for anybody who has, you know, just the inkling of having a hobby shop, call down there and be like, hey, yo, I heard Revell kits are coming back, and go find that video, pull up that spreadsheet, and one of the things, of course, that's on that spreadsheet is the Grease 48 Ford, and be like, hey, when's that Grease 48 Ford coming in? And if they look at you, or sound like they look at you, if you're not in person, like they have no idea what you're talking about, well, first of all, they're a crazy hobby shop, but they should know. They should be all like, oh, yeah, we're thinking we're going to get that October, November, or something like that. These, you know, this stuff can't just show up one day and nobody know, hey, what's this giant box from Germany? You know, Blitz, what's that? No, they, you know, the stuff we tell you about here is mostly the import stuff, because that stuff is firmly, mostly rooted in a you know, very clockwork precision release schedule. There's some stuff that doesn't come out on time, and there's some stuff that has production issues and it gets delayed. But the reason why we've never told you about Revell stuff beyond like, hey, here's the flyer for the first quarter, the kits they say they're going to get out, why we don't go into like things we know about for beyond that, or why we don't talk about round 2 kits more than a month in advance, is because that stuff changes day to day. I can tell you what the entire round 2 production schedule is supposed to be basically through the beginning of maybe February. But I have no idea, and neither does anybody else, because even If you watched any of Round Two's videos, they don't even know what's coming out month to month. Go watch one of the Round Two YouTube videos, and it's like, oh, here's this kit, and that kit, and this kit. And then you sit there and you look at the corporate release schedule for that month, and you're like, well, that's not on there, that's not on there, that came out last month. And you know, if you go watch the August Round 2 release video, it will have 6 or 7, or I believe it's 5 or 6 model kits in it. And of those 5 or 6 model kits, only one of them came out in August. The whole rest of them are coming out in September. So I don't, you know, even when they don't know what they're doing with stuff, how am I supposed to tell you? So we don't really focus on, like, well beyond things. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist. And that doesn't mean that frontline distributors like Stevens, Tower, you know, Hobby Time, Hobby Town USA, Hobby Lobby, and all the, you know, the big distributors, they know what's coming for the next 6 months. They know. Your local hobby shop for sure knows what's coming for at least the next 3 months, because they've got to order, at least a month in advance to be able to get the kits that are coming in the next month to show up on time so they can sell them to you when you expect them to come out because, well, the staff project said that new kit was coming in. Where's it at? So, you know, it's very easy to prove that Revell of Germany, or Blitzwell, is not canceling all American subjects. So if you're still peddling that lie, I don't know what to tell you. You're just a miserable person, and should just, you know, hang out with all the rest of the miserable people over there who are complaining about the lack of something or another. You know, the fact that the 2934 wasn't on the spreadsheet, and oh my God, that means it's never coming back, and all the rest of that stuff. So, you know, please knock it off. If you don't know, just and be done with it. So speaking of things that are you know, new beyond that, so yesterday there was a leak of this press release from Atlantis Model Company, which is a good chance that if you build strictly automotive, you have never heard of these people before. They're a hole in the wall, and you got what? They released a press release saying that they had bought substantially all of the U.S.-based Revell tooling. And of course, the internet went crazy. Oh my God, what is this? Holy crap, they're going to buy. Okay, so you started digging a little further into that. And then the story changed to, well, it was, no, Revell, you know, Blitzwell, they still have a bunch of the U.S.-based tooling, and these people just bought some of it. And then it became, oh, no, they bought it all. They bought it all. So what appears to have happened, from the best of the knowledge that we have been able to scrape together in the past 48 hours to address this, is the fact that Revell of the Revell, Blitzwell, came in, well, in part of the auction thing was a gigantic spreadsheet of every piece of tooling. Now, that was not made public, and I don't even know what's on it because it was just not made public in the bankruptcy filings, but there was a part of the bankruptcy settlement that listed current Revell tooling as of February 2018 as a Excel spreadsheet. So every piece of tooling was inventoried, and everybody knew what was part of the sale. Since the sale closed in May, the people from Germany have come over to inventory their tooling, right? The sale closed in May, and they had 30 days to get the stuff out of Elk Grove Village or make reasonable accommodations to have it removed. And what happens, they came over here, they figured out what they wanted of that tooling, right? There's some stuff that was made in the United States. The Ram Charger, I'm sitting here looking at, no, that Ford Ranger pickup was made in China. I was going to say the 1980s Ford Ranger, but all of the stuff that exists within that tooling bank that they wanted to keep as part of the Revell portfolio going forwards was taken and moved to another facility in West Chicago, Illinois, which is, as we talked about before, the facility that was doing the existing molding for Revell in the United States currently anyway. So it wasn't a huge shift. It was just taking it all and storing it there. What was then left over is what Atlantis picked up. Now, again, if you don't build automotive cars, chances are you never heard of Atlantis. The only two automotive kits that Atlantis has ever put out are the Talbot Lago and Alfa Romeo Grand Prix cars, which are actually, and if you're younger than I am, you've never heard of this company before, and if you're older than I am, chances are you may not have heard of this company either. Company called Merit tooled these two kits up in the 1950s, and they have subsequently been reissued by IME and by a company in Russia called Smir, and somehow along the lines Atlantis has gotten a hold of these toolings, or at least the ability to run the tooling. And they released them, both individually and as like a 2-pack set. I can only think of one place I know of that carries these around here. We talked about this in one of the videos you just watched. Talked about the fact that Revell has we have 7 hobby shops in Pittsburgh, and only one of them carries Hasegawa kits. Well, there's only one of them I know that carries Atlantis model kits as well. Now, Atlantis exists well beyond that in sci-fi, fantasy, figures, mostly sort of a fantasy tie-in with boats, things like pirate galleons and things like that. And a lot of what they have run and what they have sold is actually stuff that was run for them by Revell in the past, because it's stuff that Revell has ownership of, because at one point Monogram bought out the assets of Aurora, and that's the whole train wreck and tooling destruction story. And Revell picked up renewal along the way and all this stuff. So there's all of this stuff. And from talking to various people, it seems to be like very niche material, odd scales, off scales. It's not... I was describing it, unfairly to a couple of friends as being sort of the scratch and dent bin, if you will, because there's some stuff in there that I know people honestly would like to see reissued, and I certainly don't want to ever pan anyone's preference in models, because I don't want anyone to do it to me. So, I mean, there may be stuff there that's thrillingly interesting to you, but for a lot of Atlantis's actual products, now they own the tooling that those products are from. And they bought out, basically, what was left over. Hey, Revell of Germany only paid $49,999 for it, so how much could Revell of Germany possibly charge or Blitz? Because technically Revell of Germany is owned by Blitz, and people get all antsy when you say Revell of Germany owns everything anymore. But anyway, how much could Blitz have charged these guys for what was left of tooling they didn't want anyway? Like, what were they going to do with it? It was probably cheaper to sell it to them, for them to take it and move it back to New York, where Atlantis Model Company is based out of, and than it would be to have scrapped it, basically, in Illinois. So, hey, you want it? Come. They probably paid like next to nothing for it. So, what exactly exists of that, we didn't want it? Nobody really knows at this moment in time. Supposedly, the people of Atlantis are going to put out there what they purchased, or at least some of what they purchased, to give people an idea of what to expect in the future. The people who run Atlantis are the original creators of MegaHobby.com. Now, Mega Hobby in 2008, 2009 was sold to Stevens International, and those guys cashed out, and they went and created Atlantis Model Company with that money, and it's based out in Deer Park, Long Island, New York. So it's not like it's, it's sort of like when Mobius got sold to Pegasus, and everybody freaked out because all anybody knows Pegasus about is the fact that they make wheels. And in fact, Pegasus is an entire plastic model company on the other side of non-automotive stuff. This is the same sort of thing. I mean, they're a fairly small company, but still they have a decent product line for what they want. And they clearly bought a bunch more stuff of what they sell, which is really niche-y, sci-fi, fantasy, figures. I mean, they probably have something automotive stuff, because the other thing we found out today was the fact that Salvino's JR, the new company that is doing the slightly less than expected Oldsmobile kit, and has, of course, many other plans coming up. And again, nothing against those guys. I wish them the most success, because they're making stuff that interests me. I just want it to be better stuff. They have, from Atlantis, purchased most of, but not all, and we'll get into that in a second, the 1980s Monogram era NASCAR tooling. Now, if you just sort of sit there and stop for a second, you're like, wait a minute, now if Atlantis just makes niche stuff and it's sci-fi, and they didn't buy everything in the United States, how'd they get a hold of Monogram's NASCAR stuff? Pause and think for your second. When was the last time, the 1980s? You have to sort of take the NASCAR market and separate it into twos. There is the NASCAR stuff that Monogram did in the 1980s. And then there is the stuff that Revell did in the mid-90s through mid-2000s. That's stuff that completely and totally oversaturated the market and really just with the combination of cheaper die casts and the fact that, well, I can collect every dealer on her car from the entire season for maybe more than it cost me to build kits and buy decals, but I don't have to build the kits and buy the decals. I just get these die casts. That the combination of oversaturation and a cheaper, more robust die cast market is really what killed off NASCAR in the early mid 2000s. Plus the overall gloom of the entire hobby at that point. But, like I said, two separate things. Yes, all of the late 90s, 2000 kits are a dime a dozen. You couldn't give them away at a hobby show if you tried. I literally, I've told the story before, literally watched a guy try to sell 3 NASCAR kits for $1 at our local show that we run, and he could not sell the 3 for $1. The 1980s stuff, basically anything that was manufactured prior to 1993, which seems to be the magical cutoff line in this deal, that stuff hasn't been run for a long time. The most recently run 1980s monogram NASCAR kits were done 20 years ago in 1998. It was a multi-kit pack. Now, they have basically the only things that have been run in modern history of those things were the square body Thunderbird was run as part of the Legends of NASCAR series. The mid-1980s Thunderbird, the 83 to 86 Alan Kulwicki car, was run as a, I'm not sure if it was run actually as a Legends of NASCAR kit or just something separate. I think it might have just been something separate. And then the Pontiac Grand Prix was run as a Legends of NASCAR kit as well. All in the very, very mid-late 1990s. All with Revell marketing rather than Monogram marketing. Monogram would package several multi-car packs in the mid-1990s. There's the Richard Petty, Kyle Petty one. There's one with Darrell Waltrip, and I'm trying to think of who else is in that multi-kit package. But that stuff hasn't run for at least 20 years. Some of that stuff hasn't been run in 30 years, or even longer in the case of like the Oldsmobile Delta 88 monogram kit and the late 80s, early 1990s Cutlass Supreme NASCAR kit. So let's just talk about what should be in this box, right? So there's this box from 1981 to 1993, NASCAR kits. Chevrolet, you should have the tooling to the Monte Carlo, which should have 2 variations. There should be the regular Monte Carlo, and then there should be the Monte Carlo Aero back, the big plexiglass rear window thing. Monogram did run NASCAR kits that way, and they also made a streetcar kit that way if you've never seen one. And then you have the Chevy Lumina tooling, which was done in 1990. Now, from what already has been said by the guys over at Mike's Decals, who does all the artwork for Salvino's, they don't believe the Lumina is part of what they bought. And I believe that is because the Lumina would then underpin the Monte Carlo that was done in the late 1990s, and the Monte Carlo was run well into the 2000s. That tooling is probably in China. The body might be in the United States, but the chassis and everything that goes underneath of it is, that's over in China, so you can't have that, or without retooling the whole bottom. But anyway, in Ford, they should have the square body Thunderbird. They should have the mid 1980s Thunderbird, and they may have the very early 1990s Thunderbird, because that kit, I believe, originally, if I remember my NASCAR kits correctly, came out as Mark Martin's Folgers Thunderbird in 1990, and then would have subsequent kits that would come after that for years afterwards. I don't believe the Thunderbird chassis and running gear ever underpinned anything else, as in like the Taurus that was done. So those 3 kits should exist. Now the question with that is, were the square body Thunderbird and the 80s Thunderbird run in China or not? Or are those kits, runs of those kits, old enough that was prior to the tooling being removed? From what I understand, one of the things that Salvino's is considering is tooling up a correct 1983 to 1986 Ford Thunderbird body. So that means to me they've got at least that part. So whether or not they've got the 81, 82 square body Thunderbird, that remains to be seen. Under Oldsmobile, you have the mid-1980s Oldsmobile Delta 88, I believe is technically what that car is. And then you have the 80s into the very early 90s Cutlass Supreme. Smart money there would be tooling up a G-body, a Cutlass Supreme, to put on either the Regal or the Grand Prix, or any of the G-body chassis. They should all fit. I mean, it's NASCAR. The bodies are different, but the chassis should all are all the same wheelbase more or less. Underneath Pontiac, you would have the Grand Prix, the square body Grand Prix if that tooling isn't in China because it got run in the 90s. And then you might possibly have the round Grand Prix, because I believe, again, if I remember my NASCAR kits correctly, the round Grand Prix started in 1989 with Neil Bonnett's Valvoline car. The question there is whether or not that kit is underneath the later 1990s Grand Prix, that ran into the 2000s, and whether or not the chassis and stuff is in China. The body might still exist in the United States. Underneath, let's see, where they got Buick. You have there's 3 different Buick Regals. You have the square body, the G body Buick Regal. You have the late 1980s Buick Regal that's a little bit more rounded, but had like the sort of coved in front end. And then you have a Regal that was done in 1991. I believe, again, Hut Strickland's car was the first one of those, and then the Quaker State car and several other cars were done later. Let's see, so Thunderbirds, Chevys, Oldsmobile, Buicks, Pontiacs. So you have the Grand Prix and the rounder Grand Prix. So that's your 5. There's your tooling that fits in that window. So again, the question is of the not all. Is it the not all include the older stuff that was run more recently because it was sent to China, or does the not all include the newer stuff because the newer stuff's chassis may underpin other kits that were done more recently? I believe the Salvinos will probably tell everybody pretty much straight up and pretty quickly what they have and what they don't have once they have completely inventoried the kits, mainly for the fact that those kits are such a focused little group of about 12 tools that there's no point in hiding what you have or don't have. It's not a big mystery. Like, we bought all of Revell's USA tooling that was left over after Blitzfeld decided they didn't want any of this crap anymore. And so, this wasn't a terribly large surprise as far as the NASCAR kits go, because since Revell hasn't run any of these kits in 20 plus, to some extent, almost 40 years, what does Blitz want with them? They're useless to Blitz, because where's the vintage NASCAR thing within their overall game plan? I think for Salvinos, this is an excellent opportunity for those guys. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a new model company to be able to go in, purchase a bunch of assets for effectively next to nothing. I'm sure they paid something, but now you're buying it from the guy. You're buying it from the guy who bought it from the guy who bought it for nothing to begin with. How much could it possibly have cost them? And they're going to at least their plan is they're going to reissue several of the kits, just straight reissues of them with brand new liveries and driver, sponsor associations, and then maybe go in and like I said, fix the Thunderbird body. Maybe we get a 2+2 Pontiac Grand Prix. Maybe you get a G body Cutlass. Buick LeSabre would be able to ride the Delta 88 chassis for the Oldsmobile chassis. So there's a whole bunch of things you could do, just creating maybe $75, $100, $50, $75, $100,000 worth of tooling, which is less than half of a new tool, to create a new body and new windshield pieces, spoilers, and whatever trim you need, and be able to put those newly tooled bodies on a established existing platform that is well received by modelers. People like me, who are of the age to have built 1980s monogram kits, loved those 1980s monogram NASCAR kits. I don't know who's text messaging me, but mine, they have bad timing. But we loved those monogram kits. In fact, we loved all the monogram kits from the 1980s, because those were, as a kid, those were easy to build. They were perhaps not necessarily the most proportionally correct in certain circumstances as far as the street cars go, but those 1980s monogram kits are what NASCAR kits are what saved Monogram. Monogram was not in very good shape when they decided to release those very early 1980s NASCAR kits, and those things were a tremendous success, were very much state-of-the-art back then. I think they probably still hold up pretty well now when you consider it's an older monogram kit. Well, not even an older monogram kit, but an older monogram kit at this point. I mean, they are 38 years old in some cases. And, I think this for Salvinos is fantastic. They got a reissue bank without having to, do anything for it. I mean, obviously, I'm sure they're thrilled too, but you could do all of these things with all of these existing tooling, and it'll fund all of the new stuff. They can go out right now, I bet you, if they have, let's say they've got the Monte Carlo tooling, because that for sure, I think, would be something they would have for sure. just run it off with, I don't know whose livery you want to throw on. They throw, well, I think Tim Richmond's was done by Monogram, but you throw on some driver who's a popular driver of the 1980s, and you can sell 5,000 of those very easily. And again, there's like the investment in that is running the tool through the tooling machine, the plastic, the packaging, the decals, the shrink wrap. And it's why Revell reissued things all the time, because those reissues pay for new products. And for Salvino's, JR, it could be a very fortuitous, almost tripping into something that really solves all of their problems at once. Because if you want to look at the fact that Salvino's, one of the excuses that Salvino's used about the Oldsmobile not being as correct as it was that it's a one-man operation with a one-man design team, and they're very limited budget and this, that, and anything, and they just wanted to get the kit out. Well, now you have a battalion of things that you can reissue for little to no cost to you, and you'll be able to pay off the cost of of buying the tooling and transporting the tooling to wherever it's going to go. If it's going to go to Texas or if it's going to go to California, and one run of the kits may pay off the tooling, or two runs of the kits will pay off the tooling and everything. And now you're just making money, and you can make that money to not so much need to hire new staff, but just be able to put more money into the development phase of new products. One of the things we've still seen with the Monte Carlo is supposed to come out in October is that the Monte Carlo front ends are not correct, in the sense that the early Monte Carlo, I believe it is, has the turn signal markers in the bumper that the late Monte Carlo does. And it's a simple thing of, does the CAD file just exist that way and they fixed it? Or is it still that way? But it's like one of those little things where we're trying to get this next kit out, because obviously the next kit makes the money to pay off the last kit, and then we need to get these parts out to fix the Oldsmobile, and so we're just plowing through this. If you can just go, yoink, hey guys, how about a Buick Regal, and issue the kit for a fairly low price compared to what you'd be able to sell them to, then you could be all like, just take that cash, all right, giggle your way over to the bank, and slow the development of the new kit down, because you have product that you can have on the shelf, and make the best new kits that you can, because they're already talking about having having another new tool kit before the end of 2018, and up to 4 new tool kits by the end of 2019. So that would be 7 brand new model kits. And now brand new, is a sort of an existence there, because obviously the Monte Carlo is going to ride on a lot of what is underneath the Oldsmobile as far as the chassis parts go. But still substantially 7, newer kits, new tool to new-ish tool kits going to come out in what span of 18 months. That's a lot of capital to be putting out up front, and hoping that it is well received and sells well. But now you have this outlet of free money almost, that you could just sit there and every now and then go funk and make, a couple $100,000, funk, there's a couple $100,000 more, and that really funds the new stuff until it can pay for itself. So for Salvino's, I think was the bankruptcy of Habaco ends up being very much a win-win, because Salvino's gets something that helps them out dramatically, and for modelers, having access to those older Monogram tools, those kits are getting expensive on eBay. Like the late 90s, early 2000s stuff, yeah, that's the $5 dime a dozen, can't sell it if you wanted to, model kits. But those 80s kits, I said, most recently run 20 years ago. Most of them not run since the 1980s. So, huzzah for, just one of the things about, like, oh, hey, I saw this really cool set of decals on Mike's Decals or Power Slide, or Mike's carries Power Slide, but, I saw this cool set of XYZ decal, and it's for, a J.D. Stacy 82 Buick Regal. Well, you got to go find a $40 model kit to put these, $15 set of decals on, or if you just like, go buy Tim, I believe, somebody can tell me for sure or not, but I want to say that they did Tim Richmond Folger's Monte Carlo. I seem to remember that, right? I don't know if it's because I was looking at stuff today, or I just remember that from being a kid. But Tim Richmond's drove, as my memory serves, the number 25 Folger's Monte Carlo prior to his death. And if you wanted to buy that kit to do that car, those decals are 33 years old. They're not going to be any good. Well, now you can get it molded in white, hopefully, and with a fresh set of decals. I'm not saying they're doing that. Don't quote me on that. Don't be all upset if they don't do that, because they said they're going to be doing different cars and not doing the same ones. But just even if you just wanted to buy a set of decals, you got a white base kit that's going to cost way, way less, hopefully, than the eBay stuff does. I think it's a win-win for everybody. For the niche stuff that Atlantis has, hey, for some modelers out there, again, it's a win-win. I'm seeing a lot of people just sort of hero worshipping these two companies as saving the hobby, and it's not quite that dramatic because Revell is still, you know, in existence. It didn't go away. This is not, again, to go back to the earlier point, this is not the end of Revell's domestic, you know, existence. That does not mean that every kit we're going to get is going to be German and European, and because it's just simply not true. What these two companies have purchased are assets that were no longer wanted by Blitz, so it's really a win-win-win. Blitz doesn't have the stuff they don't want. Atlantis has the stuff they want. Savino's gets a bunch of stuff that's really, really handy to them, and in the end, we all win, depending on your view of things. I mean, I really probably really don't care what Atlantis does, because their stuff is not what I do, but the Savino stuff makes Savino's a lot more appealing to me, knowing that monogram base is underneath some of these kits that are going to be doing, and, you know, of course, Revell is Revell, and it's Revell, so... Anyway, guys, that is where we're at. This is sort of like a minute-by-minute breaking news thing. We should go outside and stand in the sideways rain and put up the Fox News bulletin across the bottom every time something changes. But as it stands, what we know, that is the disposition of what was the Revell U.S. tooling bank. Some of it is owned by Blitzvell. The rest of it was sold off to Atlantis, and now Atlantis is parceling it out to the other companies may be interested in it. So there may be other future acquisitions by other smaller companies or creations of smaller companies if there's some very, very niche product that exists. But, you know, looking within modeling right now, what is a very, very hot sector? Late 1980s to very, very early 1990s race car kits. Outside of rally, outside of customer racing, you know, GT3. That's where all the money is being poured right now into by BMAX, by Bell kits to a certain extent. Although several of their kits are going to be more modern here, but there's got the Rover Metro 6R4, you know, the Hasegawa, all the Hasegawa reissues, and even their new tool kits from 1991 Nissan, and you know, all of that 80s to 90s stuff is very, very hot right now, and so I think it's we're gonna throw a little more fuel onto the fire here with the NASCAR stuff. So, anyway, guys. That's what it is right now. It could change. But as far as it goes, this minute, this time, at 3 o'clock on August 30th, that's the news. And we'll see you guys on the other side.